The First World War was a struggle for supremacy between the European powers in the early 20th century. This unprecedented catastrophe brought great disaster to humanity. Before the outbreak of World War I, two major military alliances had formed in Europe. One was the Entente Powers, led by Britain, France, and Russia, and the other was the Central Powers, led by Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. The outbreak of World War I was the result of the confrontation between these two military alliances in Europe. So, how did these two military alliances come into being, and how did their conflicts gradually escalate into war? As the prelude to the World War I series, this video will explore the origins of the First World War. The cause of every war in history can be traced back to the previous one. The cause of World War II can be traced back to World War I. The cause of World War I can be traced back to the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. In the early 19th century, Germany was not a unified country. Scattered across German lands were various states of different sizes. Prussia and Austria were the two most powerful ones. In 1861, Wilhelm I ascended to the throne as the King of Prussia. After his ascension, Wilhelm I devoted himself to unifying Germany. He began by heavily expanding the military and carrying out military reforms. In 1862, he appointed Otto von Bismarck as the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Prussia. Bismarck was an outstanding statesman. He played a crucial role in the unification and development of Germany. Bismarck advocated for the use of military force. After taking office, he vigorously promoted the blood and iron policy. He believed that to make Germany strong, there was only one path: unifying Germany through military force. In his first week as Prime Minister, he delivered the famous blood and iron speech. In the speech, he passionately argued that endless debates in Parliament were meaningless. The great political questions of our time will not be decided by speeches and majority decisions. They must be resolved with blood and iron. In the following years, Bismarck continued to implement his blood and iron policy. He launched wars in quick succession, including the Austro-Prussian War and the Franco-Prussian War. Through 3 dynastic wars, he completed the unification of Germany. At the end of 1863, Denmark annexed Schleswig and Holstein, which originally belonged to Germany. This sparked dissatisfaction among the local Germans. Although these duchies were nominally part of Denmark, they were actually disputed territories. Thus, in 1864, Prussia, allied with Austria, declared war on Denmark. In the end, Denmark was defeated. Prussia occupied Schleswig, and Austria took control of Holstein. This was the first step in Bismarck's blood and iron policy. Next, the second step of the blood and iron policy was for Bismarck to turn his guns on Austria. Prussia and Austria went to war over the territorial gains from the Danish-Prussian War. In 1866, under the command of General Moltke, the Prussian army, with its superior military strength and meticulous battle planning, defeated the Austrian army. The Austrian army suffered a severe collapse. At that time, the Prussian army could have pursued its victory. It could have taken the Austrian capital, Vienna, in one fell swoop. However, considering the international environment at the time, if the Prussian army continued its offensive, it might have faced intervention from France and Russia. So, Bismarck decided to stop while ahead. He took the initiative to negotiate with Austria. Both sides signed a lenient treaty to end the war. Bismarck's decision was very wise, as it not only ensured the security of Prussia's rear, but also left room for future cooperation between Germany and Austria. After the Austro-Prussian War, Austria withdrew from the German Confederation. Prussia established its dominance in Germany. Now, the unification of Germany faced only one final and largest obstacle, and that was Napoleon III and his French Empire. After the Austro-Prussian War, France suddenly realized that Prussia was no longer the weak state it once was. If Prussia unified the German states, it would inevitably threaten France's dominant position in Europe. From then on, France tried its best to prevent Germany's unification. In 1870, the Spanish government invited King Wilhelm, the first cousin, to inherit the Spanish throne. France feared that Prussia and Spain would join forces against it in the future. Therefore, it strongly opposed the matter. It demanded a written guarantee from Wilhelm I that his cousin would not inherit the Spanish throne. Bismarck, upon learning this, deliberately provoked France by altering the telegram sent by Wilhelm I to France. The altered telegram rejected France's request. Napoleon III, after reading the telegram, was furious. Thus, on July 19, 1870, he declared war on Prussia. The Franco-Prussian War broke out. This was a war both sides had long anticipated. France hoped to destroy Prussia once and for all through this war, and stop German unification. Bismarck had also been waiting for the final showdown with France to compete for dominance in Europe. After the war began, Emperor Napoleon III personally led an army of 400,000 soldiers into battle, but against the well-prepared, experienced Prussian army. The French army was weak. Moreover, the French army was outnumbered. After the war started, the French army suffered defeat after defeat, although France initiated this war. By the later stages of the war, France was fighting a defensive war to protect its homeland. On September 1, 1870, the two armies fought a decisive battle at Sedan. The French army was utterly defeated. Sedan fell on September 2nd. Napoleon III led 100,000 troops to surrender and signed the surrender document. When the news reached Paris, all of France was in an uproar. Angry crowds demanded the abolition of the empire and the restoration of the Republic. The next day, Paris launched a coup, and the Second French Empire was overthrown, and the Third French Republic was established. After the Battle of Sedan, the Prussian army continued to advance into France. In January 1871, the Prussian army captured Paris. Subsequently, the two countries signed an armistice agreement. The Franco-Prussian War ultimately ended with France's defeat. On January 18, 1871, King Wilhelm of Prussia held a coronation ceremony at the Palace of Versailles in Paris as a victor. He was crowned Emperor of Germany. The unified German Empire was established to distinguish it from the Holy Roman Empire and Nazi Germany. It is often referred to as the Second German Empire, whether it was the emperor's coronation at Versailles or later when Hitler posed for photos in front of the Eiffel Tower. It can be said that France was thoroughly outmaneuvered by the Germans. It is also worth mentioning that after the French government surrendered, in an effort to overthrow the bourgeois regime, the workers of Paris launched an armed uprising and established the Paris Commune. Although it lasted for only a little over 2 months, it was the first great attempt in human history to establish a proletarian regime. After the Franco-Prussian War, France and Germany signed the Treaty of Frankfurt. France ceded Alsace and Lorraine to Germany and paid an indemnity of 5 billion francs. The harsh terms created a lasting enmity between France and Germany. This gave rise to French revanchism. In the decades that followed, the French people never forgot the humiliation of the Franco-Prussian War. At the heart of this was the Franco-German conflict. Both sides continually sought to bring allies into their respective camps. Europe gradually formed to opposing military alliances. The seeds of World War I began to take root here. After the Franco-Prussian War, France lost its dominance on the European continent. Germany quickly became the most powerful country in Europe. Germany's rise also alarmed other European powers. To consolidate Germany's unification achievements and to secure time and peace for Germany's development, Bismarck began to implement his continental policy and diplomacy. He made it clear that Germany's main interest remained the European continent, not overseas colonies. The goal was to avoid colonial competition with Britain and Russia. At the same time, it increased pressure on France. Under this policy, Bismarck began to carefully weave his diplomatic network. In 1873, Germany, Russia, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire formed the Three Emperors League. Many people may not be familiar with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Here's a brief introduction. Earlier, we mentioned that Austria was excluded from the German Confederation after losing the Austro-Prussian War in 1866. Hungary, being the second largest ethnic group within Austria, sought independence after being dissatisfied with Austrian rule following the defeat. To appease Hungary's anti-Austrian sentiment, the government acknowledged Hungary's equal status with Austria. Hungary was granted autonomy. The Austrian emperor also became the King of Hungary. Thus, the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary was formed. The Austro-Hungarian Empire spanned Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and Southern Europe. It was the second largest country in Europe by land area. It was the third largest by population. It also had the famous Skoda arms factory. It was one of the world's great powers at the time. From its establishment in 1867 until its dissolution in 1918 after World War I, the Austro-Hungarian Empire lasted only 51 years. Thus, its presence is less prominent than other European countries. After the Three Emperors League was established in 1873, Germany carefully maintained relations between Austria-Hungary and Russia. In 1878, the Russo-Turkish War broke out. Russia defeated the Ottoman Empire and began expanding its influence in the Balkans. Russia's expansion conflicted with Austria-Hungary's interests. Germany ultimately chose to support Austria-Hungary's interests. From then on, Germany's relations with Russia began to deteriorate. In 1879, Germany and Austria-Hungary signed a closer mutual defense treaty, forming the Dual Alliance. In 1882, Italy joined, creating the Triple Alliance. Although the alliance with Russia had broken down, Bismarck knew that to avoid a two-front war in the future, he had to maintain relations with Russia. Thus, in 1887, Germany signed the Reinsurance Treaty with Russia. The treaty stipulated that if one party went to war with a third country, the other party would remain benevolently neutral. By the late 1880s, Germany had already formed alliances with Austria-Hungary and Italy, creating the Triple Alliance. It also maintained friendly relations with Britain and Russia. Bismarck's diplomacy had thoroughly isolated France. This created a peaceful environment for Germany's development. However, with Wilhelm II ascending the throne in 1888, the young emperor was eager to expand Germany's influence globally. Bismarck's carefully constructed diplomatic system was soon shattered. In 1888, Wilhelm II ascended the throne at the age of 29, becoming the new emperor of the German Empire. Wilhelm II was impulsive by nature, though he was diligent and patriotic. But he often let his ideals outweigh practicality. He was also arrogant and fond of grandeur. The ambitious young Wilhelm II was no longer content with Germany's interests on the European continent. Instead, he set his sights on global domination. Wilhelm II was very dissatisfied with Bismarck's dominant personality and his detailed control over every aspect. Because of serious disagreements over the direction of national policy, Bismarck was forced to resign in March 1890. His continental policy was replaced by Wilhelm II's world policy. After the Reinsurance Treaty between Germany and Russia expired in 1890, Wilhelm II chose not to renew it. Additionally, France was actively providing Russia with loans to develop its industry. Russia gradually aligned with France. In 1893, Russia formally entered into a military alliance with France. The formation of the Franco-Russian Alliance meant that France had broken free from its isolation. A new military bloc emerged on the European continent. Germany's world policy also posed a challenge to the old colonial empire of Britain. During Bismarck's era, Germany had the strongest land army in Europe, but its navy was much smaller than those of Britain, France, and Russia. Germany's navy was entirely a coastal defense force. In 1895, Wilhelm II publicly declared that Germany was a world power. Our future lies on the seas. Based on this national positioning and diplomatic course, Germany began to accelerate its naval construction, committed to building a powerful navy. Germany's expansion policy was not just Wilhelm II's personal will. There were also many practical factors involved. After Germany's unification, with the advent of the Second Industrial Revolution, Germany's economic and industrial production capabilities grew rapidly. Economic prosperity led the government to consider expanding its colonies to acquire raw materials and markets. But by then, the world had largely been carved up by colonial powers like Britain and France. As a rising power, if Germany wanted to expand its overseas colonies, it would inevitably come into conflict with the colonial giant, Britain. Britain is an island nation, and sea power was of utmost importance to Britain, since the British Navy defeated the combined fleets of France and Spain in 1805. Britain had maintained its dominance over the seas. The British Navy was far superior to any other country. Regarding naval expansion, German Admiral Tirpitz proposed the risk theory. If the German Navy could reach 2/3 of the strength of the British Navy, then Britain would realize that even if it could defeat Germany, the losses would weaken Britain's ability to maintain its naval dominance. This would deter Britain from going to war lightly. In response to Germany's naval expansion, Britain adopted the two-power standard against Germany, meaning that Britain's fleet had to be twice the size of Germany's. This sparked a naval arms race between Britain and Germany, despite the rapid growth of the German Navy, but it never achieved the naval building goals required by the risk theory. The British Navy consistently maintained a significant advantage over the German Navy. However, the expansion of the German Navy still caused increasing tension between Britain and Germany. Before World War I, Britain had long practiced a policy of splendid isolation. As an island nation separate from the European continent, allying with no European country, this allowed it to maintain freedom of action, thereby facilitating its manipulation of European military affairs. But Germany's rise disrupted the stable political landscape of Europe. Germany's aggressive military expansion caused Britain's concern and wariness, despite the fact that Britain and France and Russia had complex and conflicting interests. Both sides believed that their primary conflict was with Germany. To counter their common enemy, Britain began to align itself with France and Russia. In 1904 and 1907, Britain signed mutual assistance treaties with France and Russia, respectively. This led to the formation of the Triple Entente between Britain, France, and Russia. Europe now had two opposing military blocs, the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. Every war stems from the key factors. First, there must be a war party. By 1907, the opposition of the two blocs showed that the war parties were in place. The second factor is conflicting interests. Before World War I, the focus of conflict between the European powers was the Balkans, dominated by the Ottoman Empire. The Balkans became the powder keg of Europe not by chance. First, its geographical location is highly advantageous. The Balkans are located in southeastern Europe, at the crossroads of Asia, Europe, and Africa, surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea, the Aegean Sea, and the Black Sea. It is a major transportation hub linking the three continents. It holds significant strategic value. Secondly, the Balkans are rich in coal, oil, and other resources. These abundant strategic materials attracted the greedy eyes of many countries. Third, the Balkans are home to numerous ethnic groups, with different religions among the various ethnicities. Different cultures and lifestyles caused severe ethnic conflicts in the Balkans, especially by the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Friction in the Balkans became constant. Why did the Balkans become so turbulent during this period? This brings us to the Ottoman Empire, known as the sick man of Europe. The Ottoman Empire was founded by the Turks. At its peak, its territory spanned Europe, Asia, and Africa. Its land included the entire Balkan Peninsula, Anatolia, the entire Middle East, and much of North Africa, due to its neglect of industry and trade. By the early 19th century, the once dominant Ottoman Empire in Europe rapidly declined. Its central authority weakened, and it gradually lost control. Countries in the Balkans successively gained independence from the Ottoman Empire. By the late 19th century, most of the Ottoman Empire's territory had already been carved up by Western powers. Only the shell of the empire barely remained. As the 20th century dawned, the already declining Ottoman Empire continued its downward spiral. Its neighboring countries were eager to seize its territory. In 1908, Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina during internal turmoil in the Ottoman Empire. In 1911, Italy launched the Italo-Turkish War, seizing the Ottoman Empire's North African territories. Due to the complex historical reasons, there were many unresolved historical issues in the Balkans. The borders between the newly independent Balkan states were unclear. Thus, under the instigation of the two military blocs, between 1912 and 1913, Greece, Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria, along with other small Balkan states, fought over territorial disputes. This resulted in the Balkan Wars. Serbia, backed by Russia, emerged as the biggest winner of the Second Balkan War, expanding its territory by nearly double. This threatened Austria-Hungary's interests in the Balkans. It prompted Austria-Hungary's rulers to resolve that they would no longer tolerate Serbia's continued success. At the same time, Russia was expanding its influence in the Balkans. Since the 19th century, Russia had long sought to secure a route through the Balkans to the Mediterranean. Under the banner of Pan-Slavism, Russia continued to expand its territory. Austria-Hungary feared that its South Slavic subjects would be incited to rebel by Russia. Thus, the conflict between Russia and Austria-Hungary became a key factor in Balkan instability. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 was triggered by Austria-Hungary's declaration of war on Serbia. Russia, as an ally, came to Serbia's defense, causing a chain reaction. In the Balkans, besides the conflict between Russia and Austria-Hungary, Britain and France also had intense competing interests. The two Balkan Wars not only failed to resolve territorial disputes, but they also intensified the confrontation between the two military blocs. Nationalism was surging across Europe, and in this tense atmosphere, a new conflict was quietly brewing. The Balkan powder keg was waiting for a single spark to ignite it. In the next video, we'll discuss the diplomatic maneuvering following the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand in 1914, as well as the outbreak and spread of World War I in Europe. We will also cover the famous battles of Verdun and the Somme. If you enjoyed the video, please follow, like, and share. See you in the next video.